Passion. A strong liking or desire for, or devotion to some activity, object, or concept. I've played many games, and a lot of them were really good. But even with creative mechanics, fluid gameplay, impactful storytelling, and remarkable plots, there's one key element that stands out for a game to truly stick with me. Passion. It's the kind of passion that can surpass the flaws, a desire to create something that invokes a feeling we all crave: nostalgia. Lately, I've been seeing indie developers craft incredible games that can stand shoulder to shoulder with AAA titles. Signalis is a standout, but there are so many other hidden gems that deserve the spotlight. These underdogs are passion projects born from countless hours of dedication and the belief of communities who wholeheartedly support these creators. With the help of this support, developers can bring their artistic vision to life. Games are such a beautiful form of art, and I love getting lost in those lesser-known titles, where just a few, or in this case just one developer, has poured their heart and soul into the project. Welcome to Hollow Body. Ever since I discovered this project on Twitter, I was excited to finally experience this new indie survival horror. After Signalis, I've grown to love supporting and getting more involved with the indie scene, which, as an artist myself, I find incredibly inspiring. It's amazing to see massive projects like this come to life. Hollow Body is one of those truly inspiring works, drawing heavily from the classic PS2 survival horror era with impressive graphical fidelity, solid mechanics, and fantastic sound design. Playing this game really took me back to the good old days, but this time I was alone at night, headphones on, sitting in front of my monitor in a dark, silent room. The immersion is intense, with the thick atmosphere and meticulous attention to detail, especially in the ambient sound, which makes everything feel even creepier. I was genuinely scared within the first few minutes of the game. But let's go back to the beginning, so I can properly explain what I loved and what I didn't like as much about this game. It definitely has its flaws, and I will discuss those in detail. In the first few minutes, I was genuinely hooked. The game opens with a text dump explaining a terrorist attack that targeted several British cities, home to low-income workers and families. It seemed like a purge. To control the situation, those cities were isolated from the rest of the world, with towering walls built around them. An evacuation program was implemented, but only for the wealthy, leaving everyone else left to die. After this setup, we take control of Sarah, who is working with a group trying to uncover the truth about the attack. Not long into the game, one of the researchers on the team goes missing, setting up our first objective. This introductory section is simple but serves as a great way to introduce Sarah and the story's backdrop. The beach setting, while straightforward, invokes a sense of nostalgia and slightly reminds me of Shadow of Colossus.
Hello? Mark? Damn, where could he have gone?
As we move forward, we treat to a beautiful visual frame that tells a story without words. A mask lying in the sand, possibly from the person we are searching for, leads us into a dark cavern. This is a great example of visual storytelling. Inside the cavern, we continue our search, with the path lit only by our flare. As we go deeper, the sound grows heavier, and the camera follows from the distance, giving the impression that someone or something is watching us. This setup reminds me of Harry's first time into the other world in Silent Hill 1, with a similar framing that I really love. The camera in Hollow Body is similar to the system in Silent Hill 2. It uses a third-person perspective with the camera locked behind the character, but you can also move it slightly using the right analog stick. In certain sections, especially indoors, it switches to a classic fixed camera. While the game starts with a brilliant cinematic shot, most of the camera framing throughout is fairly simple. There are only a few particular interesting angles, but it works well enough most of the time. In tight spaces, the camera can get a bit tricky, especially if you are playing with the tank controls option on. That said, the camera really shines in indoor areas and corridors. Sometimes you hear a monster around the corner, but the camera won't shift until you take a few steps into the unknown. This type of cinematic camera work adds to the atmosphere and created some genuinely unsettling moments for me. The atmosphere grows darker until we stumble upon a large crater. After exploring it for a bit, we finally find our missing friend. "12 days later, we meet our protagonist, Mika, who lives in an apartment in a cyberpunk city built to keep people away from the infected areas. The cutscene here is terrific. You get a brief glimpse of this futuristic city before the focus shifts back to the infected zones. I was eager to explore the cyberpunk setting, thinking it might be the main scenario for the game, but I was wrong. However, this is not a negative. In fact, it's a positive. The attention to detail in the cutscene shows how much effort went into even the smallest aspects. The developer understood that the first moments of the game needed to be perfect, and this jaw-dropping scene immediately grabbed my attention. Back in Mika's apartment, she talks with her friend, Tax, who tells her about a plan to infiltrate the quarantine zone and rescue her missing best friend, Sarah. Mika personally comes across as stubborn and determined. She doesn't care if the plan is foolproof, she just needs something to act on. With a plan in place, she hops into her car and starts a rescue mission. As Mika flies over the quarantine zone, a massive storm causes her flying car to malfunction, forcing her to make a crash landing. Despite being injured in the crash, she managed to crawl out of the wreck, and from there, we finally begin the first level.
Tax, do you copy?
The first minutes of Hollow Body are truly the highlight of the game. After the brief but well-crafted first level in cinematic, we're thrown into the city of Bristol, where the attacks took place. The atmosphere immediately conveys the aftermath of the destruction. Houses lie in ruins, and the streets are filled with debris, and the lifeless ambience is underscored by a dense, haunting background music. The music in this game is fantastic, adding weight to crucial story moments as soon as the first score hits. While the game is heavily inspired by Silent Hill, the music leans more towards something somber and melancholic, reminiscent of certain tracks from Cyberpunk. However, one thing that slightly bothered me was how the same song from the start continued to play throughout this entire area. In my opinion, it would have been more effective to use the track during key moments, rather than having it constantly loop in the background. Despite being an excellent song, its repetition began to wear on me, which was disappointing because it was so well composed. Since it's a short loop, hearing it repeatedly while exploring made it lose some of its impact. A combination of ambient sounds and pure silence might have created a more ominous and tense atmosphere. The game is very straightforward, and as I mentioned, heavily inspired by Silent Hill. It begins on the streets, and we are free to explore. Exploration is simple. You go off the main path and are rewarded with ammo. It pays off as the game provides enough to complete the whole playthrough if you take the time to explore. However, one criticism that I have is the abundance of repair kits, the healing items in this game. By the end, even on the hardest difficulty, I had nearly 20 repair sprays, which felt quite excessive. Exploration also rewards players with documents and radio signals, which are crucial for the understanding what's been happening but still leave many questions unanswered. The radio signals scattered throughout the game world tells the story of Princeton citizens and how they reacted to the events leading up to the attacks. These are often sad and conveyed through text dumps, but they are paired with believable and really good voice acting, which adds a lot of depth.
You sure this will work? It's half a bottle each. It's enough. I wonder what it tastes like. Bitter. I added honey, but it's not gonna make much difference. Just do it in one. Try not to think about it.
The documents help flesh out the lore, but much of the game remains open to interpretation. While that can be intriguing, I feel there wasn't quite enough information to make the mystery satisfying. In Signalis, for example, you have to replay the game several times to piece the story together. There's a wealth of information, like puzzle pieces in different shapes, making you feel like a detective trying to crack this case. Even if you don't get the full picture, the platter of clues makes it feel rewarding. In Hollow Body, I didn't quite get that same feeling. While I developed some theories and there's plenty of visual storytelling in the environments, I think the game would benefit from a bit more explanation so that piecing together the story feels more satisfying. A fun Easter egg: if you pay close attention to the ammo boxes, you'll notice the names of Mikami and Toyama, a clear homage to developers of Resident Evil and Silent Hill. The game is full of such references that will make fans feel at home, from the rotating items upon pickup to the classic inventory HUD. There are even a nod to the red save screen from Signalis.
Just get moving. You've not got long left.
Hollow Body is packed with passionate homages to classic titles. Speaking of inventory, it's very reminiscent of classic survival horror games. You can pause to check files, items, equip, combine, and expect them. However, there's a small UX issue that I understand, but I found a bit frustrating. When you select an item, a menu pops up with 2 or 3 options, one of which is the Use button located on the right. Even after 4 playthroughs, I still found myself accidentally selecting Inspect instead of Use, because Inspect is the default option. This creates a bit of friction, especially during combat when I need to quickly switch between weapons. I understand this design choice was likely to prevent accidentally using healing items, but a simple confirmation prompt when using those type of items would have been a better quality of life improvement. The game also features a useful quick menu. By holding a triangle or Y button, a menu appears in the corner of the screen, allowing you to select your map and switch between your equipped melee and ranged weapons. This addition makes the combat feel more fluid and tactical, especially when facing multiple enemies. I could use my ranged weapons to handle some enemies from a distance and then switch to melee for those up close. But there's one aspect of the quick menu feels a bit out of place: the quick turn feature. To execute a quick turn, you have to hold one button and then press another, which feels unnecessary. I never used this feature during my playthrough because the movement with the analog sticks were more than sufficient for navigating the game. Now onto the combat itself, which is decent but again draws inspiration from Silent Hill, particularly Silent Hill 2. The shooting mechanics are serviceable but struggle when more than 2 enemies are on screen. Later in the game, we'll encounter zombie dogs that appear suddenly and can be quite annoying. In some sections, you can even see or hear these dogs before they attack, but aiming can become confusing when multiple enemies are present. Even if you attempt to switch targets, the game may not prioritize the fast-moving dogs, making them difficult to hit. The melee combat is an improvement over the classic PS1 and PS2 games, but still feels a bit clunky. Once you acquire the guitar, you can exploit its ability to stun-lock enemies, making melee combat way easier. However, engaging multiple enemies with melee attacks can quickly deplete your health, so it's best to mix melee and ranged combat. Over time, we'll find the combat becomes relatively easy. Despite its issues, the combat is still often satisfying, with guns providing impactful and visually engaging feedback and excellent audio cues, whether you are using melee or ranged weapons. The enemies in this game are generally creepy and can definitely scare you, especially in the outdoor sections. Their movements are strange and again reminiscent of Silent Hill monsters, but they maintain their own unique style. The disturbing sounds they make, some even sounding like a baby after being killed, add to this unease feeling. While they are generally easy to fight, any mistake can punish you severely, as they can deal massive damage really quickly, particularly on harder difficulties. When you damage certain enemies, they get dismembered and fall to the ground, but they are still dangerous in the crawling state. Be careful, as they can perform multiple hits and easily kill you if you're not cautious. While the enemy variety is limited, they can all be dealt with fairly easily, except for the dogs, which would definitely give you a tough time. For me, Hollow Body was an amazing experience, particularly in its introduction, which I've already praised. However, it does start to feel repetitive and perhaps a bit tiring as the game progresses. It starts off strong and peaks again during the apartment level, where the claustrophobic dark corridors combined with the spine-chilling sounds coming through the thin walls really stand out. The apartment section was definitely my favorite part of the game. Then I reached the first puzzle, which I won't spoil, but it gave me strong Signalis vibes. I was expecting more puzzles like this, logical, mind-blowing with crazy solutions, but I was wrong. This was the only well thought out puzzle that made me stop and think for a good 10 minutes. It was enjoyable to piece together the solution, but by the end of the game, I realized this was the only puzzle that truly made me pause and examine my surroundings. I understand the developers may have wanted to avoid making the game too hardcore for casual players, which I appreciate, but I wish there had been more challenging puzzles, especially on the harder difficulties. I'm really eager for more content like this first puzzle. After this, the game begins to lose momentum. You move in and out of rooms that, while having the same basic layout, are actually quite different from each other. Inside, you can find documents that reveal more about the unfolding events and encounter corpses that display text holograms when you approach them. These holograms provide information about the deceased, such as their name and how they died. The game continues to focus on showing the aftermath of the situation, which is something I've discussed before in one of my Resident Evil videos. Showcasing the aftermath of a bioterrorist attack raises the stakes, emphasizing that horror isn't just about the monsters, it's also about the consequences of actions. Hollow Body does an excellent job of portraying this type of horror. However, as you go from room to room, you'll notice you can interact with various objects, but they often share similar descriptions. For example, many rooms have bathtubs, and Mika frequently comment about wanting to take a shower or how bad the smell is. While these descriptions are fine, the repetition across numerous rooms can become monotonous, slowing the pace down. There are moments such as reaching the first save station that briefly invigorate the gameplay, but these are short-lived. Overall, the apartment section starts off strong, but becomes a bit tedious before picking up again towards the end, just as you return to the streets. From this point on, the game follows a pattern where you alternate between open levels like the streets and the park, and tight, confined sections such as the church and the sewers. Personally, I didn't enjoy the outdoor sections as much because I never truly felt in danger. There was always plenty of room to dodge enemies, and I quickly realized how easy it was to just run past them. The game started strong with a claustrophobic and unsettling indoor section that, despite some flaws, it is still a highlight. But returning to the open streets where you can easily bypass enemies felt like a letdown. Each time I found myself in the outdoor sections, I was anxious to get back to the more memorable indoor levels. The game in general feels like a roller coaster. It definitely has high points, but those moments mostly occur early on. And even towards the end, the pacing falters, particularly during the final boss. Initially, I loved the unique mechanic introduced for the fight. It was a fresh change from the rest of the game, and it generally got me excited. But that excitement faded when I realized the mechanic was only for the final boss. I won't spoil you because I wanted you to experience for yourself, but while it was an interesting shift, I felt a bit let down by its execution just because it was the final boss and not just a boss, which would make this section so much better. Overall, Hollow Body impressed me so much despite its flaws. I played through the game 4 times and even started a 5th run. As I mentioned earlier, the passion behind this project is palpable, from the tiny details and references to the immense care taken in paying homage to the survival horror genre. It's clear that this is a love letter to fans. Anyone who cherishes the classic PlayStation era survival horror games will find something to appreciate here. The game is quite short. My first run took me about 5 hours, and the subsequent ones were less than 2. It has good potential for speedrunning, but would benefit from a way to skip the longer cutscenes after the first playthrough. Some quality of life updates could definitely raise my overall score, but even now, I had a great time with this title. Hello everyone, Gist from the future here, and as I'm editing this specific part of this video, the game basically dropped 2 patches, so one with graphical options and also another one with like skipping the prologue and much more. So yeah, the developer of this game is very active on the patches and real quick, so yeah, another reason to check out this game. If you are on the fence about buying it, the game is relatively cheap right now. If you're looking for something to play while waiting for the Silent Hill 2 remake, this game can give you a few enjoyable playthroughs. There are also some replayability, with a harder difficulty unlocked after your first completion. This mode ramps up the challenge and adds a new mechanic where you have to burn enemy corpses. Where have I seen that before? While it's a nice idea on paper, the execution felt lackluster. You have a lighter in your inventory that's essentially unlimited, and burning a corpse only requires using the lighter, so it becomes an extra, somewhat redundant step. Plus, there's not much backtracking, so you really don't need to burn bodies that often. That said, if you are a hardcore survival horror fan, the harder difficulty is still the way to go. Thought it doesn't significantly increase the challenge, it just makes the game a bit more engaging to play. You also have a few unlockables upon completing the game, and my favorite was the first person mode. Surprisingly, it works really well, though melee combat can be a bit tricky. I highly recommend doing a first-person playthrough. It feels like a completely fresh experience. There are also 2 unlockable endings, with the 3rd secret ending that requires you to complete the entire game without using more than 3 healing items on the highest difficulty. I won't spoil it, but I would say that the secret ending was absolutely worth the effort, and I highly recommend you to try it for yourself. In conclusion, Hollow Body is a solid recommendation in my book. It's meticulously crafted with memorable moments, enjoyable gameplay, an immersive atmosphere, and flawless sound design. Also, I have to mention here the soundtrack in particular, it's incredible. And of course, this game easily made its way onto my list of favorite survival horror games of the year. A love letter to classic survival horror, done with passion. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and drop a comment sharing your thoughts on Hollow Body, whether you play it or are thinking about trying it yourself. Also, let me know which survival horror game you would like me to review next. I will be streaming Hollow Body on YouTube as soon as this video is out. So if you want to stay updated on upcoming videos and live streams, don't forget to subscribe and help me support my journey to make YouTube my full-time job. Thank you so much for watching. Stay awesome, stay safe, and don't forget,